No Sum Too Small by Murray Hoyt. The whole thing took place in 2 weeks. During this year, Jeannie Williams was 15 years old. For her, they were 2 hard weeks. By the end of those 2 weeks, when the letter came saying that the thing Jeannie had hoped for was to be given to someone else, she was changed. You do not see the change. She was the same quiet, polite, serious person, but you felt the change. She was a little girl wasn't a little girl anymore after the letter came. She was older, more mature. She was a small adult. The first day out of the 2 weeks, I met her in front of my house. Her face was serious as always, trying to hide the way she felt. But her eyes danced, and her step was so light it was almost as if she was dancing. She said, "Look, Uncle Red, look at this." She handed me a little magazine called Horsemanship. She pointed to an ad which said that a woman in Massachusetts wanted to find a home for a hunter she wanted to retire, where it would be cared for well and treated with kindness and affection. The woman could not keep it because she did not have a stable room and had acquired a younger horse to take its place. She did not want to sell it because she wanted the right to check carefully on the character of the person who got it and to receive reports on how it was being treated. She also wanted to control absolutely any later transfer of ownership. Jeannie had been reading the ad as I read it, and she said very softly, almost reverently, "It says kindness and affection." Then she looked full at me, and she added a little louder, "It sounds almost as if she was describing me. It seems almost as if I'm the one she's talking about." I said, "Are you going to apply, Jeannie?" She said nothing eagerly. "Oh, yes. Dad and Mother say I can. That's the first time they have ever agreed to anything like that. I told them that if I got it, the money I've saved toward a horse could go for tack, for shipping the horse up here, and for the expense of taking care of him. A year from now I'll be old enough to get a summer job that will give me the money to keep a horse another whole year." I watched her walking around primly on her way to school. Under the primness I could sense that terrific excitement that made me expect that at any second her walk might become a dance. I watched her, and I thought that probably Joe and Mildred Williams, her parents, couldn't very well have said anything but yes. But I knew that it was a mistake. I knew the terrific hurt that was coming to Jeannie when the horse was given to someone else. That magazine was read in horse circles all over the United States. It wasn't reasonable to suppose, even before the letter came, that Jeannie would be the chosen one. Kids long for things inexplicable to an adult. In Jeannie's case, it was a horse. Literally, more than anything else in the world, Jeannie wanted a horse. It wasn't the daddy buy me a pony sort of thing that all kids go through. It started when she was very small, when Mr. Brown used to put her on old Duffer's back to ride from the barn to the pasture gate, and it grew and grew. She believed that if you wanted a thing badly enough and worked hard enough for it, you'd get it. And she never lost faith that sometime the good break would come. She was a religious little kid, as much as any kid 15 years old is religious, and she believed that God would not let her down in this matter because He alone could know how much it meant to her. Who we who lived near her were rooting for her because she was a nice kid, friendly in spite of being a little on the quiet side, and because I suppose Americans always root for the underdog. We were practical, and we'd seen an awful lot of people with a faith as clear and shining as Jeannie's taste of deep bitterness of disillusion. She asked for a horse her 6th Christmas when she made out her list for Santa Claus. It was the only item on the list. Joe and Mildred explained to her that a horse was a very expensive present, that Santa Claus probably knew they had no place to keep a horse and nothing to feed one. They suggested that she ask for other things in case Santa Claus should feel it best to substitute. She said, "But he won't do that, because a horse is the only thing I want." There were some grand presents on Christmas Day. Jeannie was very polite and appreciative, but she grew quieter and quieter all the time they were giving out presents. When they were all through, she disappeared, and they knew she had gone somewhere alone to cry. Joe felt horrible. If there'd been any way in the world he could have swung a pony for her, he'd have done it then. But he was a college professor in the little Vermont college at Mead. During the Depression, college professors took a cut, and he just didn't have the money to swing it. In addition, Mildred had a lot of hospital expenses when the second child was born, and they weren't expecting and they were expecting another baby. Joe was paying for his house, and to add to everything else, the house was in a development restricted to household pets. It didn't help much to know that all those things were true when he also knew that Jeanie was somewhere alone bawling her eyes out. She never asked for a horse again. In fact, beginning about then, she developed the habit of not asking for anything she wasn't positive she'd receive. She'd go to amazing lengths to hint around and find out whether the answer would be yes before she actually asked. She seemed to dread being refused. The first time must have been very bad. Joe and Mildred sat back after that and waited for Jeanie to forget the horse business, and they thought this was happening until the tin box appeared on her burro. It had a piece of brown sticker tape pasted on the cover, and on that was printed Horse Moon. Inside were her two bank books started by the two grandmothers when she was born, $1 her grandfather had given her for Christmas, the quarter which comprised her last week's allowance, and a penny which she had found in the big chair after the insurance man had called. Mildred called Joe in and showed it to him. He looked at it thoughtfully. He asked about the penny, and she told him. He said no sum too small. And Mildred said, "But Joe, the amount is pitiful and absurd compared to what a horse would cost. She's so ignorant of what she's up against. She's going to be so bitterly disappointed. We've we've got to make her see just how impossible it would be for a little girl to save that much money." They waited until the time was right, and then Mildred had a long talk with Jeanie. She explained that Jeanie could not buy a horse for much less than $150. She tried to make her understand how many $1.26 it would take to make $150. Jeanie listened to her and seemed to understand, but the box remained on the burro, and the next time Mildred looked there was more money in it. They didn't always know where Jeanie got the money, unless they asked her. But we neighbors knew. It became noised about that Jeanie would, at 15 cents an hour, do practically anything after school, and Saturdays within her strength and ability. And there were a surprising number of errands to be run, trips to the store, hickory nuts to be shucked, things like that. She didn't take the nickel or dime. She'd take the nickel or dime, and she'd thank you primly, and then she'd start to walk away. Only after a few steps it would be too much for her, and she'd run it as if she could hardly wait to reach the tin box. Mildred saw her put the money in once. There was really a little ceremony to it. First she opened the box and stirred the contents a little with her hand. Then she held the new piece of money a foot or so above the box to make it clink satisfyingly when it dropped in. After she dropped it, she carefully closed the lid again. She loved every horse within a mile of home, and some a lot farther away than that. This included several specimens of flea bait definitely not worth loving by any but Jeanie's all-embracing standards. And all the horses loved her. When she was a little kid still, I used to watch her from my window make a beeline for old Duffer's pasture fence, and he'd trot right over and put his head down to be petted. She'd stroke him and lay her face against him, feel his soft nose, and when she grew tired of this she'd follow him around and squat beside him to watch him eat. You'd see her lips moving, and you knew she was carrying on a one-sided, animated conversation with him. When she was called back to the house, he would follow her to the pasture fence and stand looking after her as she made for home with that sturdy, businesslike walk which is peculiar to small children. Duffer never paid any attention to anyone else who came near his pasture. As the time passed between her 6th and 13th years, her character began to take shape. I believed, and Joe and Mildred agreed, that wanting this one thing as much as she did probably had a considerable effect in forming it. She was a gentle kid, never cruel. She was quiet, and while she had a grand smile, and you knew when she was happy, she was never boisterous in happiness. In fact, all emotion, especially hurt, she hid very successfully from grown-ups, seeming to prefer to fight it all out alone.